Hi, everyone. Thanks for showing up. So, Adam, you just got back from Arkansas, when, this morning?
Yeah,
this
very
morning.
early, yeah.
Now, was that for the U.S. premiere of the film?
Yeah, it was an amazing event. We, basically, a lot of the family were there. Jason Baldwin and Pam Hobbs was there, and a lot of people who were connected to the case. It was the place where it was tried, and so it was a really amazing collision of like fiction and reality. And there was this moment where I was watching Pam Hobbs, who was just in front of me, as she was watching Reese perform her, and it was the scene in the courtroom where Reese turns away, and right before Reese left the room, like Pam left the theater because she was just so overwhelmed. And so it was a very wrought, emotional evening, but it was fantastic. At the end of it, Pam stood up and thanked us all for having made the film, and it was really overwhelming.
Was that Pam's first time seeing the actual finished film?
She'd seen it in the afternoon. There was a special screening for the family, but it was the first day she'd seen it. So she saw it before she saw it last night.
Now, I'm Canadian. You were raised in Canada, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I was not wholly familiar with the case of the West Memphis Three before moving here like 5 or so years ago and seeing the documentaries and seeing your wonderful film. How familiar were you with the case before embarking on this project?
Well, I'd seen the original documentary in '96 when it came out, and it left an impression, but I can't confess that I was one of these people who was obsessed by the case. I mean, so when I was presented with this script, I just plunged back into it. I remembered the feelings I had watching the documentary, but also I just became aware of how unique the case was. Reread Merrill Leverett's book and just saw that there was this opportunity to make a film which could not be resolved and yet had all of the atmosphere of kind of a classic crime thriller. And you know, it was such a horrifying crime scene, like unimaginable. These 3 8-year-old boys are found naked, bound, mutilated, tied with their own shoelaces, pushed in, submerged into a swamp, and yet there's absolutely no evidence around them. There's no footprints, or there's no blood or DNA. No branches have been touched. It was very, very supernatural and extreme. So this happens in a town that's steeped in religion and very strong spiritual senses of what's good and bad. And so this is clearly an act of evil. So they needed to find the demons. And when they weren't readily found, they created them. And you can see it as a contemporary witch hunt. But for me, it was also this study of like what happens in a judicial process where there's nothing but circumstantial evidence, and a lot of different possible suspects or avenues are actually not followed because they're so intent on these completely convincing perpetrators, or a perpetrator, I should say. And I just felt it was a really great place to situate a drama, and to try and understand at all moments like what each of these people were feeling as human beings, not to make caricatures of them, or certainly, even though there were like huge mistakes made from the police point of view and obvious violations of the judicial system, I think, in terms of railroading certain ideas, but nevertheless there was always a understanding of why the human beings involved did this. And so I also wanted the viewer, for the people who don't know anything about the case, the film is really designed for those individuals because it introduces the case to you, but it also makes you understand why the town would put their focus on these 3 young men. There was a series of kind of, I don't want to give it away, but it just sort of, you are led to understand why suspicion was drawn to these people. You believe it yourself, and then you begin to see that dismantled. And so you're actually experiencing it, hopefully, like the town might have felt it as well. You get the sense of outrage of the crimes, like how terrible the crimes were, but you're also kind of put through all these various stages. And the whole time, of course, you're having to understand and try to realize, like, how do we come to any sense of truth? I mean, because there's so many possible explanations, and that was the real challenge of this film, like how to fit in all of these different interpretations. So we went back to the book, and there are all these other suspects that could have been brought forward, should have been examined, but they were somehow edited out of the narrative of the West Memphis Three. So this film was an attempt to put that all back in and create this crazy world where your mind is swimming with possibilities without ever arriving at a conclusion. It's a bit, I call it Kafkaesque because I always love that line from The Castle where they talk, where the reason some things fail is because of that thing itself. It's like, the reason why certain systems don't work is for no other reason than the very nature of the system. And I think that that's what we're seeing at play here.
Now, watching this film, I couldn't help but draw parallels, as I'm sure many have, to one of my favorite films of yours, The Sweet Hereafter, just about the fact that, it deals with a small town coping with the loss, with the loss of children. What kind of parallels did you, no doubt, draw when first, coming across this story and wanting to make it into a film?
Well, I think, yes, you could say that I think tonally the films are really different.
Very different.
I mean, The Sweet Hereafter is very poetic.
Yeah.
And The Sweet Hereafter is dealing a lot with a very particular romance. I mean, there are a number of romances in The Sweet Hereafter, and this doesn't have much romance at all.
No.
and I don't mean romance actually in a creepy way, maybe in a very creepy way in The Sweet Hereafter, maybe. But there's an emotional, romantic linkage. And there's a lyricism in that film, and that's not what this story is about. This is a lot more factual, and it's not as because of the nature of the story itself being so open to interpretation. I didn't go with the approach. I mean, Sweet Hereafter is a very personal movie, even though it's based on a book. There are a number of things that were elaborated which were really personal to me, and so it's a different type of project, I think. Though, yes, a town dealing with unimaginable loss. Yeah.
So we have two clips from the film. Do you want to set up the first clip?
Yeah, the first clip is introducing this character that you wouldn't, if you know the documentaries, you may not be familiar with, Chris Morgan, and he is brought up as a possible suspect, and you'll see what happens to him later on in the second clip. But why don't we have a look at it? So I mean, Reese Witherspoon gives this extraordinary performance. She really completely inhabits this role in a way that's so selfless, really, because she looks unlike she's ever looked in any movie I've ever seen her in. She really does inhabit this Southern mom, and this is I should have set it up, but this is the scene right after the discovery of the bodies where she's quite drugged out, and the detective comes, and the detective comes with this picture of this person who, in fact, did visit the house sometime before, and the friend asked for a photo of Stevie that he took with him. And I realized as a filmmaker, we shot this scene, which I didn't include, of Bobby Angelo, the dark-haired guy, taking the photo from Reese and saying thank you. But we also were shooting, he was saying he was wearing jewelry with skulls on it. And we shot these close-ups of, you saw them eating chicken. We shot these close-ups of the jewelry and the skulls. And I realized as I was editing it that I was making him like suspect number one, right? Just by including stuff that was on the transcript. Most of the stuff that's in this film is actually drawn from court transcripts or from police interview material. It's not made up as such. So, but as a filmmaker, of course, you can put any emphasis you want. And maybe one of the issues I had with these excellent documentaries, which I think are really amazing, but they very clearly say, this is the person you should have gone after, or this is the narrative. It should have been, and they create in the viewer's mind the sense that justice could have been served if this avenue had been followed. But I'm not so sure if each of the suspects that they're labeling are not as ultimately as open as the three men who ended up being indicted. You know, so it's really this deeply mysterious case. It's so upsetting that the killer is still out there, and we can't really know specifically who it is. And yet the narrative has been closed by how justice was meted out and the nature of this Alford plea that the boys have taken and now been released with. But it raised all sorts of issues as a filmmaker. And when you talk about The Sweet Hereafter, I mean, I could go anywhere with those images. I mean, because they're from my imagination. It's my own script. It's really a narrative I can take any way I want. I put in the Pied Piper. I was able to create these very subjective experiences of what the characters were feeling. But when you make a film like this, you're really tied to certain specific realities, especially when you know the case is so obsessively followed by certain people. I mean, if you go on the net and you look up West Memphis Three, there are a number of sites that are dedicated to this and which present every piece of evidence, everything that was entered in the courtroom during the trial, all the police surveillance tapes, all the interrogations. The next clip that we're about to see is based on a video document that you can see online, which is the actual interrogation of Christopher Morgan. So now we're recreating it with Dane DeHaan. And so even in the performance, there was an attempt to use the words, but of course we're interpreting and he's giving certain emphasis, so it changes the meaning. It was unlike any other experience I've ever had as a filmmaker. It was so rich in material, and yet you know, you had to be careful. And it took me a long time to edit this film. We were talking about what I was up to. I mean, it took a year to edit this. I actually shot another film in the meantime because it was just, there's so many different ways it could be structured, and yet it had to chronologically make sense, and it had to stick to what actually happened. So it was all this internal tweaking and harnessing and rearranging to make it cohesive as a drama at the same time as it had to be an encyclopedia of everything that happened in that town 20 years ago.
You must have felt immense pressure just in making this project, let alone completing it. How did you manage that, and how did you get through it?
Well, that's why it took so long. It really was about, first and foremost, I mean, you know, absolutely serving the West Memphis Three. I mean, making it clear that they were innocent. However, I also wanted us to understand why they were victimized. Like, it didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, there were reasons. And so, again, I'm sort of, this is like spoiler alerts or all that stuff. But, I mean, the ideal viewer of this film doesn't know anything about the case at all. And it's just sort of watching it for the first time, which is difficult maybe, you know, with a kind of a festival audience or with critics, but it's shocking how many people don't watch documentaries and, you know, don't know about the case. So they're just plunged into this world where they see this horrifying crime, they see the suspects, and then they're actually feeling, as I say, like what the actual machinations are. But that just took a long time because I'm manipulating that, and I had to be very clear about what I was, why I was making the decisions I was making. It was very different. Like, my films by nature are very subjective, and they're not linear, and so I could make incredible allowances with timeline, and it's part of the way I structure my stories. But this I thought could be like that going in, but once you start editing it, you could go, well, you can't really do that because it gets too confusing and there's just too much going on.
Would you ever take on a project like this again?
Wow, not immediately, and I would
Your next film you wrote yourself.
Yeah. The next one's an original story, and I wrote it myself and produced it myself. So it's sort of more on the model of my earlier work, and I'm comfortable with that, and I'm proud of that, and it's probably, you know, my core business as you might say. But this was just irresistible. Like, I'm fascinated by how we construct ideas of truth, like or reality, like you know, like. Sweet Hereafter deals with that, obviously, and Exotica, and a lot of my films, Ararat, and certainly, you know, Adoration, and Chloe, I guess, too, in its own way, and they're all kind of like where, we all have a psychological need to believe that something is real for certain reasons. There's always an agenda, but then that intersects at some point with someone else's expectation or desire, and that zone is very interesting to me, like how you negotiate that. Again, this is not a film that's dealing with romantic love. Normally I'm dealing with notions of passion, but there's something obviously very passionate about the extent of pain that these characters are reeling from. There's also this odd thing, which I've come to realize, like last night especially when we had the premiere, is that you have two kind of movie stars that are not acting like movie stars. Like you have Colin Firth playing a private investigator who's working for the publicly appointed defense team, who are very green, who had never been in a courtroom before, and he's there working pro bono because he's against the death penalty, and the boys are facing the death penalty. But as he's doing the investigation and as he's spending time in the courtroom, he realizes that, in fact, they're innocent, that there is no evidence against them, and it's all being cooked up. And there's nothing he can do. So even though he's dressed, in real life, Ron Lax is a very successful private investigator, and he's dressed like the knight in shining white armor. He looks like Atticus Finch, but he doesn't get to be like Atticus Finch. He doesn't have that agency. And I think that that's also a frustration that the viewer feels, and it puts you, again, in that place where there's a helplessness. Like, you see this unfolding, but you don't think there's anything that can be done about it.
And Ryan Reynolds appears in your next film that's playing at the Cannes Film Festival, and like this work, he appears not to be the Ryan Reynolds that we all know.
Oh, he's amazing in the new movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't. I'm so excited to.
How much pleasure do you take from taking, a star like that, like Reese, like Colin, and just kind of breaking them down and making them seem new to an audience?
Well, it's very gratifying. Like, I think, like last week, we're talking about how crazy this month is between the three movies, but in the middle of it all, there was the tragic news that Bob Hoskins had passed away, and there was an article in The Guardian which said that of all the roles, like the best, his masterpiece was Felicia's Journey, which is a film we did in '99, and that was a complete reinvention of Bob Hoskins. Like, he was doing something he'd never done before, and it was a very scary character for him, and I love being in that place. I love that idea of a character who has a persona and using that persona and shifting people's perceptions of it. It's a very exciting zone because the actor really has to go out on a limb, and they have to feel afraid a little bit, and they have to trust me, and it can create something quite amazing. So, that's in 10 days. I'll see you in Cannes in 10 days. Is that surreal? Yeah, if it's going to have this world premiere.
Yeah. Well, let's show the second clip.
So this again is based on actual visual. Like, you can go online and look up Chris Morgan's police interrogation, and you'll see the actual recording of what happened that night. And this is us now taking a film camera and recreating the same scene. So I mean, for people who are really interested in film, it'd just be interesting to go online and to see what that material looks like, because you're going to hear the same text, but it's not dramatized, right? So you're not as invested in it. And yet, what's actually being said, and what we cut it out, but the way this character goes on to implicate himself in the video is kind of shocking. So, and yet, you'll see in the film what happens to this tangent. It's sort of this other person who confessed to the crime, and then retracted it, and then confessed again, much like Jessie did, who kind of started the whole vendetta against the West Memphis Three. So it's just. Yeah, this is the craziest thing to talk about because I don't want to give away for people who don't know, but maybe a lot of you already know the case, so I'm not sure.
Well, why don't we get a sign of hands as to who knows the case and who's not really wholly familiar with it?
Oh, that's great. Okay, so it's like half. So that's great. So, yeah, I mean, it was interesting because for the people who know nothing about it, I think the film just it's really powerful because you're just plunged into this space without any of the theories.
Now, two of the West Memphis Three are co-producers on the project, Jessie and Jason. So they're obviously supportive of your vision. But Damien Echols,
right.
Has he seen the film?
I'm not sure if he's seen the film. He read the first draft and he had a very strong reaction, which we listened to certainly. And Because the film is trying to situate how these outsiders were viewed by the community, we actually, as part of the plan of the film, showed his outsiderness and actually tried to. And I think he reacted and thought that he was being re-victimized, so we really toned that down. We took it back completely. But I think maybe even more than that, like Damien, has his own story, and that story is very much about what happened to him right after, and what happened to him as he was in prison, and also how he, formed this relationship, and it's the subject of his book, which came out, and I think he just really felt that he wanted to tell his story, which I completely respect, and he should do, but it was odd because his family was there, but he wasn't. Last night.
Last night. Yeah. Wow. What do they think?
Again, I think they were just overwhelmed by it. I didn't get a chance to talk to them as much because I was just so consumed with talking to Pam and Jason I saw them there, but it was really packed last night. It was really because there are a lot of the people who are involved with the actual. The recent Alford plea and a lot of the legal community, and it's quite a small town like Little Rock, and you really felt that everyone knows each other, and it was an intense evening.
Yeah. Going back to Reese's performance in the film, I mean, she really just loses herself in the grief that Pam undergoes. It's almost hard to watch at times. How close did she get with Pam in the making of the film, and was that crucial for you to get those two together?
It was really crucial for her. I mean, I think that she spent a lot of time with Pam, and she just wanted to. As someone who comes from the South, it was really important for her to represent the character accurately, and that nothing should feel like cliche, or we shouldn't dismiss it because, well, that's what happens there, or that's the South. It really was important that the details be adhered to. That was one of the great things last night too, was just people feeling that they were back in that space, so people from there. So that was a huge boost to the production team. But she's really remarkable. I think she let herself go. I mean, with this film in a number of different ways. She just didn't care about the way she looked. She just wanted it to be authentic, and also she wanted it to be part of this ensemble. Like both Colin and Reese are not playing traditional starring roles. They're part of this fabric, and it's kind of selfless. And I love that they were so committed, like all the actors were, to invest themselves this way.
How do you work with actors who have to portray grief on screen? I can imagine it's an extremely sensitive process, but I'm curious what your approach is.
Well, I mean, my approach generally is just I'm a very attentive listener. I believe that the only, for all of the efforts that are put on during a film production, everyone being obsessed with their own particular, job, the only thing that's really magical is what the actors are doing, and that they're physically incarnating the space, and they're investing themselves in that, and that has to be protected. It has to be observed, it has to be watched, and when an actor lets themselves go to that place, I'm just there at the other end and trying to appreciate and make sure that it's everything it can be. But it's an odd zone. I mean, sometimes in certain films it's just sort of tipped into another space, and it also has to be. It's a difficult job directing, because one part of it is quite, you have to be like a surgeon. It's like actually from Sweet Hereafter, when Ian Holm is talking about that moment when he's driving the girl whose throat is blocked up, and he is holding a knife, and he could at any point perform a tracheotomy on her. And so he's saying at one point I'm the loving dad, and the other hand I'm like a surgeon with a scalpel. And maybe directing is a little bit like that too. You have to be aware of so many technical things in terms of what is making the shot, not the least of which is time and schedule, and whether or not you're actually getting the shot, making the day, losing light. But first and foremost, you have to be there for the actor and make sure that they're being attended to. Because a lot of the time they're not. I mean, I think I talk to a lot of actors. I've never been directed by anyone else, so I don't quite know what it feels like, but I think a lot of actors feel that they're left on their own, And you can't do that when you're asking actors to go to these places. You can't leave them alone.
And we're going to open it up to the audience.
Sure.
So if anyone has a question, please just put your hand up in the air, and a mic will be coming to you.
Hi there. Thank you for coming, sharing your experience and journey. My question was, is there a possibility, I haven't followed the case, I haven't seen the film, I came late, but is there a possibility that it could be the opposite, that they were guilty? And how would you feel if that's the case, proving something so well done in this movie?
Well, I don't think that's the case at all. And in a strange sort of way, they've already been victimized and, you know, have served for a crime that they didn't do. So it seems improbable to re-victimize them. So, and I think the more you go into it, it's, from my point of view, there's no evidence at all. I mean, look, I mean, you had an entire, not only were they tried, they served appeals, they were retried, and everything was sort of brought forward that could have been brought forward, and there was still no hard evidence. So it just seems completely unlikely and quite impossible.
Thank you. Arafat was such an amazing film. How did you come to that project?
Well, that's the other film that talk about responsibility. There was a lot of responsibility. I came to that project because I always knew I had to do that film at some point. I'm Armenian. It's a film that's dealing with the Armenian genocide, but more about the repercussions of that into the present day, and dealing with 4 generations. And it was a project that I had been thinking of doing since my early 20s. I just didn't really have the means or the opportunity until a very special producer approached me and allowed me to embark on it. But like with this film, though for totally different reasons, I did feel also that sense of responsibility. Though I didn't feel as constricted as I did with West Memphis Three, because it is the product of my imagination. Even though I'm talking about the history of my people, the stories are fictionalized. They're based on some elements of reality, but not a well-known reality. This is a very known reality, so it was a different set of challenges. But I remain really proud of that film, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering if you went back to the town that it was filmed or took place and beyond the documentaries and transcripts, if you talked to any of the people, and then in hindsight, how their reaction was to share their perspective of it when they know what's kind of happened since then, and if that really changed from what you heard of the transcripts and how you really tried to align that to be representative.
Well, here's the interesting thing. I mean, let's make no mistake about this. There are people, especially in West Memphis, in the town, who still believe that the 3 young men did it, because that's the narrative that they've been raised to believe. And it actually creates a sense of closure. Because if you don't believe that narrative, it's such a raw issue. The murder of children is the worst possible crime, not just for the parents, but for the community around. And it's a small town. So the labeling of the 3 as the perpetrators was really convenient, and it felt so good because they were so odd, especially Damien. He was such an outsider. So it allows many people to kind of seal it. I talked to the current police chief. I went to West Memphis and I spent some time there. The current police chief was a young officer at the time, and he believes that they did it. I mean, he believes that there were mistakes made, which he admits to, from the police investigation. But you know, when you confront them with the fact that there's no hard proof, they still really subscribed to the issues that could be attributed to Damien's mental health issues or to his goth sort of persona. And it still seems, in some ways, still rooted in that place. I still think that if he was presenting himself as he did then, now, it wouldn't be much different. That town is pretty it's quite specific. It's specific to a lot of towns like it, actually. It's quite conservative. And it's shocking when you go to Memphis, Tennessee, and then you cross the bridge into Arkansas and you're in West Memphis, and it's a whole different world.
I recall a lot of underground musicians rallying to the support of the West Memphis Three as this was going on, particularly people like Henry Rollins and the underground kind of punk and metal community. Did that have any role, or did music have any role in this film?
Yeah, it does. But we were going to music of that period, so there's a lot of Slayer in this film, because that we tried some other bands, but that just seemed like to be very. I wasn't using contemporary music. Everything is sort of rooted in the early '90s.
So I know very little about the case, but just watching the trailer and Colin and Reese's performance, it's intriguing. It's so powerful and looks so well done. What challenges or obstacles, or how your approach with Reese and Colin, that they were portraying these real people, did you find during the course of this filming?
Well, okay, so they're playing in this town where everyone believes this narrative. They're playing two characters who start off believing that narrative as well. I mean, she's a mother whose child has been found murdered in the worst possible way. So, she said, as she said publicly at the time, there's a very famous clip on the local news, which we recreated in the film, where she says, "Just look at them; they're freaks." Like of course they did it. So she's on the record of having said that, but over the course of the trial and the time afterwards, she completely reversed her opinion. And that was based on an emotional, intuitive sense that something was amiss. And we see that transition in the film, but it's coming from a very intuitive space. With Colin, he's an investigator, so he's very super rational, very sort of objective, and he goes in thinking that they did it, but he also begins to see that the various points don't kind of line up, they're not connected, and he realizes there's a whole travesty of justice. But he can't do anything because he's not a lawyer. He's just working for the lawyers, and you kind of get a sense in the film of his frustration. So these two characters become aligned, and by the end of the film, they meet, and they kind of have this really powerful scene where they have a mutual kind of recognition of the fact that they're the only two people in this town who are questioning anything, but through totally different means. And so you'll see it. I mean, but very different approaches.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Adam. It was wonderful. And please check out the film. It's on demand, and it's going on iTunes very shortly, and in limited release in theaters as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.